and the Nia Song of Ice and Fire podcast. I am Sir Matt the Bud Knight.
And I am Ser Ezra, the Watchful. And friends, we are back with some massive news.
Yeah, as first and foremost, let me just say that to all the people that left me comments saying, Matt, you don't know what you're talking about. You can't trust this source, all of these things. And they're like, there's no way it's happening. Guess what? You were wrong. I tried to tell you. I hate coming in and being the jerk, but I tried to tell people and they didn't want to listen.
Right.
And they left all course comments. You guys have no idea what you're talking about. Well, Guess what?
Yeah.
You have no idea. There were other Game of Thrones content creators who said there's no source material. There's no way this would ever happen.
Right.
There's 0% chance. Well, guess what? You were wrong. Okay, there we go.
It's been said.
Okay. Yeah, I demand respect is what I demand.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, and then some people have deleted YouTube videos saying where they said this stuff because they don't want to look bad. Well, guess what? You were wrong.
Right. And those things have been screenshotted, by the way.
And I demand that you bend the fucking knee.
Yeah. Dude, it is so unbelievable when you told me about this and we went and talked on again, Jimmy, our friend, we were talking on his channel about this when it broke. Matt did an awesome video about it here, and it's been great to talk about. We like to hype these things, go with this. We really talked about how you could legitimately do it because there was a way forward, and everyone just thought, this is bogus. What are you guys talking about? And today we have literal updates from the creator.
Okay. Yes. So here's the story. So this was reported a few days ago of Hollywood Reporter. It hit Twitter. Then it began to sort of hit. And at first it seemed like, okay, maybe we'll see. Don't know what it is, whatever. Then it began to hit like IGN and all these other things. And the big one for me was CNN, because why would CNN report on something like this if there is no validity to it when CNN is owned by Warner Brothers, the same people who own Game of Thrones? Like, it's for them to fact check. All they can do is say, hey, is this real? Yes. Okay, sick. Like, that's, but people still denied it. They still said no.
Right.
And I said, I think it's true because George has said that there were several series in the work, and we knew a handful of them, which he goes into in this report we're about to dive into, which was the Sea Snake, right? We're getting like a Corlys Velaryon addition to House of the Dragon, and House of the Dragon was one of the projects, but he still said there are several more that I haven't began to discuss yet. So the big news today, though, was it started earlier this morning when Emilia Clarke was in an interview and said that a few things, and then George did his normal sort of not a blog, big post where he broke down everything else. But Emilia Clarke said that, yes, I've talked to Kit, and it's his project,
his show. Yeah,
his show. So this is where this to me is the most interesting thing, is that, we know that because I talk about it all the time because I follow, Warner Brothers stock. I talk about it a lot,
right?
Just as a company, they left AT&T, they merged with Discovery Channel, and they've already begun cleaning house in all of their divisions across the company, with like the exception of HBO. And they have said that they want to structure this company like Disney is structured, which is like you have your big, huge pillars like Star Wars, all these things, whereas Warner Brothers is kind of like all over the place. And one of the pillars is just sort of HBO, but it's beginning to look more and more and more like Westeros is going to be its almost own pillar in the company. And that's what we're seeing, and that's what we're saying. So that's why I was 100% on board when this thing was even sort of somewhat announced, because I was like, it just makes too much sense. And they're already working on it. We knew that George had signed a huge contract a few, months ago. And then the news of this thing came out. So Emilia Clarke came out and said this today, but the big deal is that Kit Harington pitched it to them. That's the biggest news of this whole deal. Yeah. It's not like Warner Brothers was sitting there saying, hey, let's do a Jon Snow thing. Everything else, if you look at all the other projects, are all prequels to a Game of Thrones.
Right.
So so clearly, okay, so we're going to go back and go do all of this stuff. It wasn't like them saying we need to cash grab season 8 or like the end of Game of Thrones, and obviously not season 8, but hey, now you have an opportunity to fix it and make it better.
That's right.
But Kit Harington pitched it to them.
Well, and see, that makes me think he's in the know. He knew these things were in development, and he's in those circles talking or whatever. And he's thinking, hey, I'm the guy, right? I go beyond the wall at the end of all of this or whatever. Is there a story to tell there? Is there something that he maybe talked to? They talked to George. They talked to the showrunners and stuff. He knew there was stuff or whatever. He's involved in the project. So this is huge. And I was so pumped. Like, George gives you very specific details about how stuff was leaked. Hey, these three out of 4 shows were out there. I was surprised that the Snow show hadn't been leaked. For a long time, it stayed under wraps, he said. And until it was like broken and out there in the news, he actually said no comment in several interviews about it. But again, as Matt just said, Emilia Clarke comes out, and then you've got this reporter. He praises the reporter from the Hollywood Reporter. And like
some of the people that were some of the other Game of Thrones creators that were commenting on this were trashing the reporter, saying he's a snake and a liar. George says he's a great guy.
It's unbelievable. And so sometimes I know you look at a source. I mean, the Hollywood Reporter, you kind of go back and forth sometimes on what's out there. They get a lot of stuff right sometimes. I mean, this is clearly they got something huge right here. This is whatever. He's got his source. He knows somebody. George even breaks down all the different things about like your assistants, the guy at the photo, copy machine, the Xerox machine. He's like, there's so many people involved in these projects that they're bound to sort of leak. This has not been greenlit. He said it's in the 3rd draft stage, by the way. Right. 3rd draft. So that's pretty cool. He's like, Kit Harington came to his house, to Santa Fe and met with him and his team. He actually said that Kit Harington brought his own showrunners and creator, he brought his own team to this. And I'm like, he gives you so many details in this Not a Blog post that I was just shocked by it.
Right. Yeah, I mean, right here, look, yes, there is a Jon Snow show in development. The Hollywood Reporter story was largely correct, as I would expect, no less from James Hibbert, who, remember, I just said, just do some searches and you'll see other Game of Thrones content creators who are saying that guy's a snake and a liar and trying to stay relevant. I've dealt with a lot of reporters over the past few years, and Hibbert is one of the very best, an actual journalist who does all the things journalists are supposed to do. Yeah. I mean, like, I know, why, guys. Look, I'm not saying that, you need to trust Ez and I for all your sources, but we know what we're talking about. I know what I'm talking about when it comes to Warner Brothers stuff. I'll leave it at that. I know what I'm talking about.
And the thing is, that this is what we do, right? And so it's like, Matt clearly he looks way even more at like the stocks, the market, how things are going.
You got to listen to the shareholder meeting is where they tell you
follow the money. What Matt says, right, all the time.
You have to.
But then I guess even me, so I'm more basic. Like you see this article, you go look at it, you read it from the Hollywood Reporter. We were hyped about it last week. And to hear people coming out and saying fiction, not going to happen, blah, 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 just to immediately dismiss. I'm actually so glad that it comes back the very next week and they're like, yeah, check it. Check yourself a little bit. Like these things, this is cool. I mean, again, people are kind of going to be, and we got a joke already in here from Wex, right? Like he was, right. GRRM is now being distracted by Kit Harington.
He actually has a Winds of Winter update we'll get to too. Right. We go through. So let's go through the rest of this and we can sort of come back. So he says, but yes, it is true. This was not an official announcement, not an official announcement from HBO, though it seems it was sort of a leak. He says, I did a long interview with James Hibbert last week. This is the guy who broke it. So maybe George was the one who leaked it, right? So at the end of the call, he asked me a few questions about the spinoffs. Is it possible one of the spinoffs is a sequel rather than a sequel? He asked. I answered no comment. Then he asked, is it possible a member of the original cast is attached? Again, I answered no comment. Then that was all. But plainly, he found somebody a little more forthcoming than me, who I don't know, and I suspect I never will. A good journalist protects his sources. So the guy who wrote the report flat out asked George, and George said no comment. George could have said no, but he said no comment. Okay, right. George, come on now. That gives them the confirmation. See, Emilia Clarke has already said, she mentioned the Snow was Kit's idea. So that part is out. Yes, it was Kit Harington who brought the idea to us. I cannot tell you the names of the writers / showrunners since that has not been cleared for release yet, but Kit brought them into his own team and they're terrific.
Let's go.
Then he goes on to say, various rumors are floating around about my involvement or lack of the same. I am involved, just as I am with the Hedge Knight, the Sea Snake, and 10,000 Ships, and all of the animated shows. Kit's team has visited me here in Santa Fe and worked with my own team of brilliant, talented writer consultants to hammer out the show. All 4 of these successor shows are still, and by successor, he means just 2 Game of Thrones, which includes like House of the Dragon and stuff. Even though those are prequels, this is like, just the term successor to think about that. Outlines and treatments have been written and approved. Scripts have been written. Notes have been given. Second and third drafts have been written. So that's, all. That's the way television works. Then he goes on to talk about some other stuff, just other things he's working on. That's all I can say about Snow for now. And then he says, this is a new day, though. Hoping there are 1 or 2 or 3 or all 4 of the Game of Thrones of the spinoffs to make it to air. So, I mean, that is true. Just because it's there's a difference of in development to like we're getting it. Like The Long Night was in development.
Yeah.
Hey, so absolutely. that is fair. Then he goes on to talk about a few other things. Just all, a lot of the stuff George talks about. But then he finishes with a little Winds of Winter update. Yes, Winds, no, I have not forgotten. I am back with Tyrion this week, which is interesting because we do know and we'll probably finish with Winds of Winter news. Just because he had said he was struggling with Cersei chapters. Then he got to Jaime. Then he was like, I'm going to go wrestle with Jaime and Bran. Now it seems he's back with Tyrion. So all these Lannisters, all this stuff, connections, which we can definitely break down. But obviously the main story today is going to be the Jon Snow sequel series. Now, I found this, Emilia Clarke was also, I think, asked if she was involved with it, which she said no. Like, I have no plans to return to it, which, look, here's the thing.
I don't know.
Go look at every actor. Andrew Garfield said, I am not involved in the Spider-Man movie for the past 3 years. Okay.
Right.
Yeah, I don't buy that for a second.
No, the fact that she knows that it's Kit's idea and everything, right, means that she was informed. What, I mean, I don't know, picked up a rumor or something, like text her. I mean, she knew intimate information about the show that he's developing. And it's like, she and he have this thing. She's carried after the dragon. There's a story there. And good for her saying, no, I'm not involved in any way, shape, or form. Literally just keep saying that. Just keep saying it. Even if you are or aren't, it doesn't matter if it's true. It doesn't matter if you're lying to us. We don't care. It's meant to be a surprise. So that's fine. That's a good thing. Yeah, we get some great comments coming in here from some of our listeners and folks here. It's just awesome. Laura Todd out here. I'm excited for Game of Thrones.
Because if you look at Kit Harington's, say, filmography, really, he hasn't done much, honest to God, sort of since the end of Game of Thrones, to be honest. Like, he was in Eternals, that the Marvel movie, but his role in that was like rather small. Now we do know he's going to be involved in more Marvel stuff as Dane Whitman, right? The Black Knight going forward, but we don't know how long it's going to be until we see Eternals 2 or his story begins to unfold.
For sure.
But he really, honest to God, isn't involved in that much. He was in Modern Love, which was this kind of cool little was it Amazon Prime? Maybe it was this thing, but it's like just it's sort of just like romances and relationships and stuff like that, but they're all like very episodic, and they got a bunch of big actors to come in for it, but it was like a 1 episode thing. So it's like he was in that in 2021. He has nothing that he's scheduled for in 2022. Oh, he's in a play. But it's like How to Train Your Dragon. That's a voice role. He hasn't really been in a lot of stuff since Game of Thrones, at least like mega roles, I guess, except for Eternals. But even there, like, his screen time in Eternals was maybe like 10 minutes. It wasn't that long.
Right. Well, I mean, again, this seems like he knows this project with HBO is big. And if he's the one kind of pitching this and running with this and creating a team around it, producing it, sounds like, you know what I mean? That's a big thing. It's a big feather in his cap, not only as the actor and the lead in it, but then just to kind of orchestrate something and get the approval of HBO to do a freaking series that could win awards and all sorts of stuff. Doesn't
also the way George describes it, and if you go back where because George said that, hey, there was other things in the mix that I'm very excited for, but I can't tell you about, months ago. And then you look at his language here, this thing seems a little like far along.
It does. Yeah, it does actually.
It actually, it seems a lot
Well,
further along than like, oh, hey, we just thought of this idea. I mean, he said that Kit brought it to him a while ago.
well, that's why I brought up the third script, going through and getting it down to where it's like looking really good. It then goes to executives at HBO or wherever, and they say, "Yeah, this is greenlit," and then that gets greenlit, and then they start to kind of do their thing and set up their team and everything, and then we'll kind of go from there. But I 100% think this is gonna be cool, and this is something. This is big for him. It's big for George is involved. They literally, he says, the best thing I thought he said in this whole thing was that Kit and his team came to me in Santa
Right.
Fe, and we sat down and we worked through, and they took some notes, and we talked about where this could go. So, like, you guys can say what you
Right.
want, you can think what you want. I mean, I know people won't even want to throw shade at the idea of the Mother of Dragons coming back, but literally, R'hllor brings people back from the dead. Jon himself is back because he was brought back. Like,
Right.
it's
Now
so
I would say that to me, the most interesting thing about this is that, like, now it could help / hinder Winds of Winter, because now George has now George has a way out. Like, let's say
Sure.
the reason that it's taken him so long was, like, we knew he wasn't working on it when the show was out because he got depressed and a lot of stuff.
Sure.
But then since then, he said, I've been writing and I've been writing. Do you think he has now changed the ending of Winds of Winter because this Jon Snow show is going to come out that's post 6, and he's like, I can adapt my ending, which fans didn't like?
Dude, again, there's so much secrecy around, like, what did he share with Dan and Dave? What did they use, not use? The storylines. I've always found that super fascinating. I hope there's a documentary someday that explains it all, because he has a team. He has a team of writers. They're his group, his assistants. He said he shared some information now, and he got the backlash. He saw what happened with season 8. He also knows that they didn't execute it or carry it out to the degree that he thought they probably should have. But he's got to stand behind his show too. It's super successful. But I get it. Like, he actually, remember, he revised all those chapters. And he went back and he said, I'm doing major revisions to my story, like during the pandemic and stuff. Guys, come on. I mean, he can change the story. It's always evolved on him. He had a 5-year gap plan. No, out the window. He's changed stuff. It evolves. He's making it better. He's trying to create like a masterpiece here. And he's trying to go back and world build at the same time. You know what I mean? He's trying to go back and do all of these different things that, well, if you read this series, like the Dunk and Egg stuff, he needs to be intimately involved in that because it ties into really big mysteries in the series. It's a fascinating world, and now he's getting his chance to. Matt, we said this with Jimmy the other day. GRRM likes working in TV. He loves TV and film. He's a huge fan of it. So for him, it's like, this is his dream. He would almost rather see these things come out and him be involved and work with actors and help people and stuff. And I know that's what's going to discourage some folks is Winds of Winter. Guys, where's it at? But I will say, as we said, go look at some of our other episodes and podcasts. Matt and Jimmy broke this down. Matt talked to me about it. It's like, there is a lot of evidence that supports that he is super close to being done with Winds of Winter. Within striking distance.
He's way further along. It's obvious now that he is way further along than he was for a lot of the years. He said, I'll have it done next year. Like, clearly you are nowhere close. At least now you're like steaming along. So now, like, one of the interesting things here is, look, so he talks about look, a lot of these shows are here, and he's saying, and not necessarily any of these will get greenlit. My guess is actually that not all of these are going to get greenlit. And I would say this. I would say, like, look, they get them and they get some scripts down and they get the ideas of, hey, here's what it's going to go. I mean, Disney does this all the time. We've already seen them cancel Star Wars projects that they announced, at the Disney Investor Day 2 years ago, and they announced like 30 projects. So it happens. And a lot of it has to do with reaction and stuff like that. So, like, the Sea Snake, right, which is the Corlys Velaryon sort of spinoff of, he's like, we want to give him his own show, but that's going to depend on House of the Dragon, I'm sure. If their characters are very well received in House of the Dragon, then boom, we're going to get that. So that one to me is like, that one's could happen, probably going to happen, because I think Corlys Velaryon looks freaking sick in the show, and I think it's going to happen. The Hedge and I would say I definitely think would happen, because, like, the Long Night was like, you have to adapt and create a lot of stuff, and that's so far away. Like, that one got scrapped for me. Like, when that one got scrapped, I was not shocked at all. Actually, I was surprised that's the route they went.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
I was like, that's crazy. The 10,000 ships, right, which is the Nymeria one, that's another, like, a lot further away.
A lot further, right?
I would not be shocked if that one gets get dropped. But to me, the Snow one's definitely happening because, I mean, because there's a difference. It's confirmed that it's in development. That is the difference of it's not confirmed like, hey, we have a release date.
Sure. Right. Yeah, for sure.
That it's in development.
And actually, if you read, George is very, very good at the way he writes stuff and outlines stuff. Even in his not a blog post, he says, when I can tell you more, I will, meaning there is more, right? I mean, that's the whole thing. Read between the lines. When HBO says I can, then I will. But yet I've not been given that permission. One more thing that's interesting. Look at this line Matt has pulled up here. I am involved, just as I am, as he said, with the Hedge Knight season and all the animated shows, right?
Yes.
I mean, it's just like they're building
animated shows. By the way, shows plural.
I know.
The only one that's actually even been said is they're going to do like the Ice Dragon, which technically isn't Game of Thrones, but I'm sure that's like in George's mind because it's certainly sort of like a spiritual beginning of it, and a lot of it like literally feels like it could have worked, or it's like a story inside the A Song of Ice and Fire universe. He wrote it 10 years before he wrote it, but as we did a breakdown of that with Jimmy.
That was cool.
With
that was a cool
Sir
book.
Jimmy.
Yep.
But so hold on, what do you mean by animated shows plural? Right? Because there's another thing where it's like, okay, we didn't even know that there were more than one. We only knew that there was the one.
I know. That's why I was like,
technically not even A Song of Ice and Fire.
Something I think as he's looking back on this, I think he snuck in a little something here, unless other people have more confirmations or more articles out there. I hadn't seen anything. I hadn't seen anything really about multiple animated shows, because he distinguishes the Hedge Knight, the Sea Snake, and 10,000 Ships, and so like in addition to those three shows,
which we knew that he had announced those like last summer. I remember we have a video or two on that.
Yep.
So I guess the interesting thing though is how do you think this would how would you do this, right? Because again, all of these shows could happen. None of these shows could happen. The only one we know like for certain is House of the Dragon, because that comes out like next, in a month. A little over a month. So I think this almost gives you an opportunity because, you look at like delays and things like that. We're almost at like a 2-year in between for these like Netflix sort of streaming style shows. So for me, I think you just go back and forth. If the Jon Snow thing is going to be multiple seasons, which we don't know yet. We don't know anything. We don't know anything about like what the actual structure of this. But if you go as low as say it's going to be like a Kenobi, right? Which actually might get a second season, but it might not. So you get like a 6-episode thing, or you get like 2 to 3 seasons.
Right. Again, it just depends on how far they want to take the story, how slow they want to progress Jon Snow and all that stuff. I mean, what do they want to do? What is George worked up or cooked up or whatever? And maybe this arc that we're going to see is well beyond everything that he's established, and they're doing new stuff, and that's okay. Maybe it's also tying in some stuff that wasn't included that he gave to Dan and Dave that he think would be really cool, and he's reworking some stuff with them to go back and do this. I just think it's fascinating that Kit pitched this, because I think he was told stuff about Jon Snow's character in his arc from George, by the way, who he did meet with. And I've looked this at he's met with multiple actors. We actually, in some of our theories, go back to what actors were told by George, like little things, and stuff that were kind of cool. And so there's something there. And so now they're working on the show and moving forward with it. But I think you're right. Like, you have House of the Dragon coming out, and then you do Jon Snow, because that alone being a sequel and it being Jon Snow, who we all know, all the memes are out there. It's largely popular. It will sell itself literally because it's a sequel. Then it allows you bring people back to the platform, and then they say, "Oh, I didn't watch House of the Dragon," or maybe they did, whatever it is. But they'll come back for Jon Snow, and then guess what? House of the Dragon is sitting there, and everything else that you want to go back and consume, and people will. It's a great idea. It's a good marketing idea. It's just good for building the Westeros-verse. You need a sequel that kind of pushes things, and there's also filler around it as well, which is
so here George says Snow has been in development for as long as the other 3, but for whatever reason it wasn't announced and never leaked until now, which means it's been in development for at least a year.
Yeah, top secret. I think that it was probably if you could imagine a sequel show is going to make news the way it did, right? The way it did last week, the way it
Oh
is
yeah.
right now. So it is shocking they kept top secrecy on this, but as it gets larger and goes into multiple drafts, like you said, it gets leaked out there, and so this to me is cool. That means they're prioritizing it, and it was kept more guarded, more secret, or whatever because it's huge. It's the
Well,
one that's gonna
I think it was easier to protect because it's something we like, because the first thing they announced was the Dawn Age or the Long Night, right?
Mhm.
Which is like a super prequel, really, like a super prequel. Then
Yeah.
it was House of the Dragon. So then it was like, okay, so like we had always assumed as fans that the story was over at at A Song of Ice and Fire. And then when it starts getting announced that all these projects are all prequels, I think nobody even begins to suspect that there would ever be a sequel show. We like, we've always thought like, oh, maybe you could do
Yeah.
something, but it was never like anything actually plausible.
Right. Right.
It would
Exactly.
be like if there was a Lord of the Rings sequel in development right now. Like what?
Like
You know what I
what?
mean?
Yeah. Like
I
we
mean,
wouldn't believe it. With like, yeah,
we
we wouldn't
wouldn't
believe
believe
it.
it. Like that's not gonna like that wouldn't work. And so I think that's why this one probably never got leaked, because this one has been in development for at least a year. At
Yeah.
minimum, if not longer, probably longer, because
Probably longer because that's what
I mean,
George
if
said.
you
Yeah.
right, because if you go back again and you look at Kit Harington, I mean, man, he was in Eternals. Again, he had a very small, let me pull up his filmography here. So you look at his filmography, right? Eternals, and he had a very small role in that. In 2019, he was in How to Train Your Dragon, which is a voice role. Not that that's like not serious or anything, but clearly like a voice role isn't the same as being on like a Game of Thrones style production, which takes like 6 months to film as opposed to like 6 weeks, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so then you go to television. He was in obviously Game of Thrones, which is his big one until 2019. And then it's like, okay, Criminal UK. He was like in a single episode. This Modern Love was a single episode. He hasn't really done much since really like 29 since Game of Thrones ended.
Right. Yeah, for sure. And I think again,
so he probably started working on this in 2020 during the pandemic when he's just sitting at home.
Well, again, yeah,
like everyone else.
Right. There might not have been a whole lot of roles. The pandemic does hit right afterwards. All this different stuff is happening. And again, I think he sees an opportunity here. He knows the executives are saying we got to build out this Westeros-verse or whatever. And if you're smart and you're that guy and you want to get into producing and doing something, this is a genius move for him. I think this is a great.
And think about this is the difference was you look at 2020. My guess is he probably had the idea in his head in 2020.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because another HBO Max show, because again, HBO Max was like became a thing in like 2020, right? Yeah. I mean, like that's true. Like 20, like end of 2020 was when HBO Max launched, right? Peacemaker was actually the same way. James Gunn was sitting at home during the pandemic after they'd like sort of finished the Suicide Squad movie,
right?
And he like had this idea, and he just like, I just penciled it out while it was during the pandemic.
Yeah, and
I mean, we're still in the pandemic, obviously, but like when we were like
lockdowns, stuff. Yeah,
and so Kit Harington probably had the same thing. Is he was sitting there. Plus, Kit Harington went through some like alcoholism and stuff like that, and so he's very connected to this character.
For sure. And look at the backlash that you had from season 8. We don't know who all wanted, who had contracts, who wanted out, who were done. We don't really know. And there's some probably leaks and rumors about that. I'm not real up on all of that stuff because there were different things with actors and stuff on the show. I feel like clearly he wanted something more for Jon's character. He knew that there was more story to tell, and goes and talks about this with the team. And they're like, yeah, like, let's go ahead. They're up to a third draft. As far as what George can tell us, there's probably more that George just can't say. And that's cool. So, and there is a way forward. Again, we were talking on Jimmy's live stream. There is such a way forward with how things shaped with season 8, where we're going in Winds of Winter, the revisions, all this stuff. It's George's world. He can do what he wants with it, whether you like it or not. I mean, the show does affect him, and he was involved in all of it. So,
okay, so check this out. So March of 2021 was when a new wave of prequel pitches, again, this Jon Snow thing is probably part of this as well, was considered by HBO among which Nymeria and the 10,000 Ships was one of them, right? Deadline posted an update saying that the pitch was real, but that it had advanced from a pitch from HBO to ordering a pilot script, which happens all the time. There's actually a lot of pilot scripts that get done all the time. It doesn't mean you see a show or anything. And then a lot of pilots get made. Doesn't mean they ever actually see the light of day. We don't see them, like the HBO executives and stuff watch it and they say yes or no. So March 9th, George gave the thing as well. So March 9th, 2022, which means that's probably when when Snow, as it's codenamed right now, was pitched as well, which you think about it begins to make sense. If you're Kit Harington, you're probably, because that's right once like WandaVision and all of these Marvel, the way Disney sort of changed it. Hey, we're doing these, like, we're taking these characters from big things and we're putting them into this style of a show.
Right.
Because he brought it to them, which is still the craziest thing about this.
It makes it so cool. Actually, to be honest with you, it makes it better, because if it's just somebody else developing it and saying, hey, we talked to Kit, he wants to be involved. No, he's like, it's his idea, which totally changes the whole level of excitement around it. Meaning, like, the actor's excited about it. They didn't, just say, hey, we're going to pay you a lot of money to come back and do this. He's like, no, I want to work on producing. I want to get into something. I need work. I need to, get back after it. And again, he's kind of tied to this Jon Snow character right now. And I think you kind of understand, like, look at like Star Wars and other things where people go in, they're known for this role. It's hard for them to get out and do other things once they get on this level. And they really got to kind of work to move away from that. And as Matt pulled up his filmography, he hasn't really had a chance to do that yet.
Much.
Right. So you could call it the pandemic. You could call it a lot of different things, whatever, family life, whatever.
He went to treatment. I think he went to like rehab too. Yeah.
Right. So the thing is, though, he has this idea, wants to do it, and he's pouring himself into it. I just think that's awesome. And the fact that he has his own showrunners and his own team, like, okay.
Right. I mean, so yeah, in May of 2019 was when he checked himself into a facility, I think, because he's been open about it, that he's been in dealing with alcoholism, right?
Yeah.
August of 2019 was when he joined the MCU to be Dane Whithold in Eternals. Mm-hmm. I don't know when that was filmed, but again, his role in Eternals wasn't necessarily big. It will be bigger in the future. So he probably came up with this idea around that time.
Yeah.
Like 2020 pandemic, and then it somehow got pitched to George, because that means that meeting that we thought the other one is 10,000 Ships, and then George, I'm gonna see if I can find that exact blog post.
Right. And while you do that, I want to mention just one comment here real quick. I want to bring this up because when we think about the Jon Snow show, I think people kind of think it's just picking right up there and there's no time jump or anything. We have no idea. And we have no idea what they could or what they might do with it. So I love to entertain any type of crazy idea. I love the tinfoil stuff that goes on with the Winds of Winter predictions and stuff. But yeah, I mean, who knows what they're going to do? I'd love to see the supernatural bit jump up a notch or two. And I'm not sure it'll be 50 or 60 years, but some sort of time jump. Maybe Bran's all messed up, or who knows? Or maybe it's a smaller scale show where it's simply just Jon Snow becoming king beyond the wall or something. I mean, there's so many possibilities, because we don't have Winds of Winter, the second to last book. We don't have the last book. We have no idea. We have some idea in our mind as to where this is all going, but clearly this is set up to be something beyond Jon's arc in A Song of Ice and Fire and dealing with this aftermath or whatever. I mean, as far as we know,
here's an update from George. This was earlier this year. He says there are also, he's talking about just things he was working on. This is where he said, I worked on Winds, not as much. I think we remember this one where he said not as much as I did in 2020, but that doesn't mean some is still more than none. There are also successor shows that have taken a ton of my time and attention this year. So this is March of 2022. I have seen some comments out there questioning how much I involved in the new series. The answer is a lot, deeply, heavily involved in every one of the new shows in my world. And it's my world. And while I have been working closely with some fantastic writers and showrunners, ultimately it's up to me to try to keep the canon, canonical. And to do that, I can to help make the new shows great. Then he goes on about House of the Dragon. But so that's all I can tell you, right? Sort of right for now.
Right.
Things that HBO have previously announced or hinted at, or and he leaves it ...
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Let's go, George. Right. Yeah. I love it. I love it because that does totally mean he is. And I think when he's talking about the level involvement, to me, the thing you would need to be the most involved with would be the Jon Snow show. I mean, again, clearly with like Dunk and Egg, a lot going on there, and there's some major tie into A Song of Ice and Fire. But House of the Dragon gets a little further back, and he went ahead and already had Fire and Blood out there. They have kind of an outline to pull from, and
Right.
Yeah, what do you got?
So here he continues on. This is from the March of 2022, the earlier one. He's saying like, what can I tell you? Well, let's see. And then he talks about like the Corlys Valerians series, the nine voyages, now the Sea Snakes. The other one's 10,000 ships. He's looked at drafts and everything like that. My team and I had some great sessions with his team and everything like that. The Hedge Knight, you know what I mean? The show would not be called Dunk and Egg, yada yada yada. And then he doesn't even mention any of the other things in project. He does talk about some of the animated shows here. I guess I kind of forgot about this. One of the animated shows is that it would be set in YT. That's right. The working title is Golden Empire. Obviously he did say that, but I don't think I can say a word about any of the other animated shows, plural, which means there's at least 2 more in development.
What? I mean, that's wild. I love this.
So now we have to go back and contrast and compare to what he has said in the past. And so here he's saying, look at all these things I'm working on. And we're like, wow, 3 things. Little did we know he's hiding the fact from us that there's a freaking Jon Snow series out there.
Yeah, and if anything, to his mind, for people worried about Winds of Winter and they're going to go there and get, but he's tired of hearing that. And I'm honestly tired of people kind of coming at him for that, because he's giving you, again, great TV, and he's going in and making canon for this and approving stuff, signed a big deal with them and said, you guys want more, let's do more. His mind is in Westeros and Essos and in the world he's been creating. So I kind of feel like he's going there, and he's also then making progress. And he's updating us on his blog about numerous chapters being done. I feel like Winds of Winter, literally, it will not shock me at all if he either announces that it's coming out this I think at some point it's going to come out next year. To be honest with you, with all the stuff that they're setting up,
I think it's announced.
They're setting up this verse, right? They have all this stuff, animated show, prequel show. Now we've heard about a sequel show. So that's all getting stacked in there. And then he's making, headway on Winds of Winter.
Yeah, I would not be surprised if we, to me, I would say, unless the way I would do it is House of the Dragon. It's probably going to be like other shows, which is kind of almost like we're not really on that pace anymore of getting a show every year. You're like, you know what I mean? It feels like we get a show now like every other year, or like they get us like season 2 is like every other year for a lot of these like shows and stuff like that. I mean, am I wrong in that? Is that what am I? Is that what it?
Like at least not a year, because it did feel like it would be like, oh, we got it in October, we're gonna get one next October.
Game of Thrones was every year, but since we've moved to this sort of style, I mean, you look at I don't know, like The Witcher. I mean, it was like season 1 was like, and then you wait a few years. Stranger Things was like 2 years in between season 3 and season 4.
Right.
So yeah, my guess is Snow won't probably hit until 2024, 2025. Yeah, which is totally accurate. But I guess the way I would do it is you have House of the Dragon, and then the next year you have Snow, and then the next year you have House of the, like you go, if it's going to be multiple seasons, which it might be. Right. You do that sort of back and forth. Like that's how Disney does it. Like where Disney is like, I mean, you look at their wave of like MCU content. It's like we've yet to have like the same characters back to back, but they have so many things stacked where it's like right now it's like crazy. It's like, man, we're getting Marvel and Star Wars at the same time. And
they're pushing a lot out there on the platform for people to go kind of consume, and you now have multiple teams working on various shows, and they're going to see what works and what's doing well, and they're going to build out this Westeros-verse. It is exactly what they have to do to compete with the likes of Star Wars, Marvel. I mean, compete, air quote, I should say. It's just so popular. It's such a good thing for them to do. It's their most successful like show. They should, one of whatever. I feel like it's gonna It's going to thrive. And you need time. They're building this out. They're saying, okay, we were running the Game of Thrones. It literally is like international, world renowned. It's just awesome. Brought everyone to the water cooler to talk about this. And now they're saying, let's actually set up something that is larger and that has multiple shows, as Matt said, to alternate back and forth, like a prequel, a sequel, bounce over a little animated, something to tide you over while we work on this. And you need people coordinate that. Like honestly, Marvel led the way and has shown people what you can do, and people like it, and it generates a lot of talk. It keeps it kind of, people are active in it, and they want to keep up on it. So I love it.
Do you think that this will change Winds of Winter, or possibly Dream of Spring? Do you think this changes
the ending, the book?
Yeah,
I think that George has an ending in mind, and I think he has always known where this is going to go. He is working towards it. I think that the show, he gets bogged down. He has different things going on in his mind. Sort of, he needs a lot. These are really intense things to write, and they take a lot of connecting the dots and laying breadcrumbs and doing a good job. I mean, he could just blitz through it and just go real basic on it and just start to finish. Here's the story. Fine. Here you go. But that's not what he wants to do. He wants to really lay down a lot of like secrets and hidden things that could go this way, go that way, or whatever. So I feel like maybe he did change it a little bit. I feel like maybe I don't know, like there's something that with the show and the backlash from season 8 or whatever, I feel like there is something else going on. So, and if Jon Kit Harington, Jon Snow comes in and says, "Hey, I want to maybe do something beyond." What do you got, George? It might have affected him, and he might have changed his story.
So, especially because a lot of the problems with the ending to Game of Thrones wasn't just that it was like, it felt sort of rushed and everything like that. Was people were like, wait, Bran becomes king because it's like a good story, and I like some of like Arya sailing off like makes total sense to me. Like even Bran becoming king, I'm not opposed to the idea as long as, hey, you give us a good reason as to why that story adds up and makes sense. I'm in, then I'm there, then I'm there for that story and that plot point. Jon killing Dany seems a little weird because we have young Griff and all this other stuff in there. It's like, you kind of got to get us a lot further with Jon, who's dead right now in the books, to see like where, and get Dany to go mad to where that could all make sense. But I think maybe it's an opportunity for him to say, hey, like, now I get a chance to rewrite this and work on it with the show. And go from there. And I guess my real interesting thought is, man, what do you think Kit Harington's like? Because he probably, it seems like he clearly went to George, not only with like, hey, I'd love to do more, but also like a script, an idea, like an outline.
Right. And I think, he says that, and then maybe they talk about some points or whatever, because his team went there and met with him. I think probably all the other teams did too or whatever, but we actually get George saying that, no, his team came out and met with me, and we sat down and went over and talked about things. Dan and Dave did the same thing. They went out there, and it's like, it's really the respect, and it's sort of like what you want to use from that author and how you're going to let it influence your show and be sort of authentic to what we're doing here. I don't think George would be giving it the nod that he's giving it here, the blessing that he's giving it, or whatever. He seems to be excited. I mean, just, I don't know. He didn't like, it seems like he wants to do it. It feels like he's excited about it in some way. And it was one of those things, he's hinted that he was excited about other things that would be coming out. And so this would be one of those things. And that just means there's more story to tell with Jon. And there's more that he could, whether he's going to go back and retcon stuff, or I'm not saying that's going to happen, but I mean,
do you think that's why George has used the word successor shows in his blog posts in the past year, as opposed to simply saying prequels?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Because
now it makes a little more sense.
Successor,
meaning because it is both a successor and that it is the successor to Game of Thrones.
Yep.
But I guess it's like when you think about,
he's a word,
like Star Wars. Okay, like we're making Star Wars prequels, plural, not Star Wars successors.
Right.
Because technically they are Star Wars successors, and that they are So it's just see, this is why I always say you have to really pay attention to every single word
that he says.
Dude says.
Exactly. What he writes, the way it's natural to him, the way that he writes his stories. If you look at his literature, this is the way he likes to write. So even in interviews, people have said he's very careful with fan questions. I mean, he's very careful on how he delivers the wording in such that it could be taken this way or that way, not committing to one thing or the other, hiding stuff behind a different word choice. That's just what he's clever. He's very clever in how he words stuff. He can come back to you later and said, no, actually what I said was successor shows. I mean, like,
right. Cause yeah. So look at look at this line too. This is from the March update of this year. He's like, this is right once House of the Dragon had sort of confirmed that they were filming. They had finished filming. He says, I'm very excited about the other successor shows as well. I'm dying to tell you about them, but I'm not supposed to. So, maybe a few things I can tell you, things that HBO has previously announced.
Yeah.
So that means he's like, he can only see that. At that point, he then went on to talk about the 3 that we sort of knew about.
Right.
So he did not include he did not include Snow.
But he didn't include that, but is that one of the things that you think he's excited about, right? Clearly I can
infer back in March, absolutely.
Yeah. At that point, he's excited about it. So that tells us he sat down, he talked with Kit, he's talked with his team, and he said, this is something we want to do. And he is excited. And now he can share that. And he is actually almost like praising that article writer and coming out and talking about actually there's a whole section I wanted to talk about just for a second. He talks about clickbait websites. So in contrast to the Hollywood Reporter, he talks about clickbait websites and podcast. He's not talking about us.
He might be. You never know. I mean,
no, he's not, because he's actually talking about an interview where they skewed his words on Lord of the Rings, on the Rings of Power, where he did an interview and they went out and said, George hopes that, House of the Dragon blows it out of the sky or whatever. I'm totally making it up and paraphrasing. I haven't even seen it, but based on his blog post, they took his words out of context. And I'm only bringing this up because George's, like he said this, his words matter and they are important. You're twisting you're not actually reading what I'm saying. You're not just the same thing in the book series. Why is it so clever? Why is it so difficult to finish? Because it's the difference between a crow and a raven. It's the difference between like all of these winter is coming and all the phrases and all the stuff that happens. It's just like the little things the little details that he adds in. So when he talks on these shows, he's still that person. And when he writes on his blog or shares something in an interview, he's still that person. And he's realizing, hey, people who I'm talking to aren't smart enough, or maybe they're just sort of clickbaiters and they want to turn his words into hot takes. And he's very irritated with that. So I want to bring it up because that tells you, he says, pay attention to what I'm writing, which Matt and I do. We pay attention to the words that he is actually giving us and what he says. We have our commenters coming in on our videos. We did the whole the one thing about Rhaenys Targaryen and the whole thing that he says is that like it is well known that she is dead. He didn't say she was dead. He said it is well known. Like he chooses his words so that way he can kind of leave it open and he doesn't have to answer your question directly. Authors do this. They leave a back door so that way they can kind of might need to use that, might need that escape or that out or whatever.
Right.
So I just thought it was kind of cool.
And I'm reading his, and then I want to get right to Laura's comment here. He says, if I'm permitted a moment of snark, these clickbait webcasts and podcasts annoy me. Yes. And he was so what he is saying is that, he did not say that House of the Dragon and Rings of Power are in competition. He says there's plenty of room for both shows to succeed, plenty of room for more sci-fi and fantasy on the thing. Yes.
Right.
Yes,
we're allowed to say that. Matt and I are allowed.
Well, he is.
He says he's competitive. He goes on and say that he's competitive and he wants to win. And
he doesn't necessarily view it as a competition, but unfortunately, George, it is a competition.
It is.
I mean,
sure.
It is actually. I mean, like it is in the world of the way. But
one thing he says that is critical is he says more fantasy means more fantasy. Right. And so that's where you can be like, okay, cool. And that competition in the fantasy realm is good if they do it right. You know what I mean? Like that's I mean, again, he also wants to be king of it, and they want to kind of, and they are.
Well, I mean, dude, he did lore work for Elden Ring, and Elden Ring is going to win Game of the Year, and it's like considered to be one of the single greatest video games ever made. We have to bring Jimmy on to talk more about it. Unfortunately, I haven't played it. It's a Dark Souls games are like the difficulty is so ridiculously hard. It's like it's too much for me.
Right.
So Laura says, have we heard anything about other cast members involved? So no, not yet. The only thing we know is that Emilia Clarke has said she's not involved, but that doesn't necessarily mean she isn't. Okay?
Or that her fingers were under the table when she said it,
Right.
Yeah.
I think having a show with Sansa coming back as Queen of the North could be interesting if Jon comes back as King Beyond the Wall. I think so too. I don't know I haven't really seen what is she been up to. I think she just had a baby, didn't she?
Yeah, I think she did. And
Sophie Turner.
Yeah, she was
Turner.
Jonas.
Jonas, I think it is. I think she changed her name, right?
I don't know, actually. Yeah.
Well, she's not X-Men. She must not an X-Men anymore because that thing's over.
Right. I did just see her talking about how much she loved him in the house party. I don't know where I saw this. Some on online social media. I'm scrolling. I follow all of them, and it came up her love story with him. So
anyways. she's in some show.
Okay.
The Staircase miniseries coming out this year. Colin Firth's in it. Don't know. Cool. I don't. I do not know anything about it. Sounds like it's coming out on HBO Max May 5th, so it's already out. So
you're saying
she's
doing HBO stuff.
Seems like nothing's going on.
Yeah, she's right there. Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean that I think though we could all, and this is where the speculation will start over the next year or whatever. As these things come out, we'll start to learn more. Leaks and things will come out that people might be involved in, and you don't really need them involved necessarily out the gate. I think somebody said, whether it was Jordan or Laura or someone else, that just seeing Jon up here doing his thing and just doing some stuff with Ghost and the Wildlings and setting up your own world there and these batch of characters is great. Because quite frankly, who knows if they want to extend this series? George has an ending. Let's talk about this for a second. The ending of A Song of Ice and Fire happens. The world still exists, right? You still have all these players.
Correct.
Brand is king, all this different stuff. If you want to continue the story, you can. You could jump ahead 5 years. Brand's been ruling. What is Sansa doing? Who did she marry? Arya's back from her thing. Who knows? I feel like that would be something that would be awesome to see them be, I don't know, to have somebody come back and try to take over. So like a ET situation or a freaking, a Shai or something. Who knows? That you could do crazy stuff. So
yeah. See, I don't know. I don't. To me, this actually, I don't know. I think it's. I don't know how I towards the end now the idea of him finishing wins and stuff like that. I actually feel more glad that this is happening. Because to me, it makes it feel like he gets another opportunity to he gets an out. I guess like that's my thing is maybe part of the problem, maybe part of the reason it's taken him so long to finish was that the way the show ended, a lot of people had problems with the story. And if this was if that was his original plan, then it was like, okay, well now I need to like alter it or make my version of that be better. But now if we're getting a Jon Snow thing that takes place post that, well, okay, now I can change it. Like,
or exactly like again, in a show, you don't have the details that you have in a book series. If he gives him the ending, we see the ending and he's like, wow, no one there. It needs to be more clear, or I need to make something more distinct moving forward because clearly this got lost. And I can kind of see maybe he's going back and reevaluating some of that. Nothing wrong with that as a writer to go back and take a look at some of this stuff or whatever. I still think it's just super complex and he's trying to get there. And clearly for a couple years now, if not more, since the end of season 8, he has been working on a Western. He was signed, by them. I forget when that was, when he signed that big deal or whatever. But
it was, I think it was last year. It was sometime last year, maybe middle to end of last year was when that was sort of announced. Okay. Like,
because he got like a sprint of Winds of Winter writing in there, a solid batch of good time where he
sounds like he just said he just hammered out a bunch of stuff.
Right. A bunch of stuff, and then he was working with some pretty pivotal. He said he got past like this Cersei situation.
The clutch of Cersei chapters that were giving him a lot of trouble.
Right.
Then he said, and we can talk about that for a little bit here too. As we'll wrap up here soon.
Sure.
That he did just say he was working on Tyrion chapter for wins. So he had said he was working on Cersei chapters that were giving him troubles. Then he said he was writing Jaime and Brienne. He's like, then I have to go wrestle with them. He hasn't said anything about Jaime and Brienne again since the last blog post of where he like mentioned specifics about wins. But now he says he's working with working again on Tyrion. Now the big one is, remember we said if you look at it, he has yet to say anything about writing Daenerys chapters and wins.
No, he has not. But Tyrion's over there, and maybe he shifted. I don't know if he has done some of that, or if that was because again, Dance was full of Dany stuff, and then some stuff that was meant to be there was pushed into Wins. So that's the other interesting thing, is a lot of stuff was cut from Dance that he had to push over into Wins. So we already had like a whole bunch of it done. I think somebody said at 1.400. I mean, we broke it down. There's an episode where we kind of break down all the different stuff that he had done for it, and it's fascinating. I think he's a lot closer. It's really come down to revisions. And let me bring up something else here. So the idea is like, okay, the show passes him by, Matt. It passes him by, and he is writing his story. Okay, we will never know what the George story would have been had there been zero influence from the media, working with different people, all those content creators, and all this stuff that's happening is happening while he is writing. The world around you, I don't care what you say, it influences you. And he does have his story. He has set this up or whatever, but it has been interrupted. The writing process has been interrupted. He's had to come back to it, start, stop, go back and forth to it. So that does affect it. And maybe he did change, because if it's unimpeded, if he doesn't have the show and he writes straight through, he's telling this story, it still was growing. Even the tidbits that he's given to Dan and Dave for the ending was stuff he had not yet come to, right? He doesn't have he doesn't know all of the little details that need to take place to get us to those points yet, because he hasn't written it. He has 2 full books left and maybe more. It's growing on him. So he actually can just tell you, here's where I want to go. This vague shot out there of like, I have some pillars I need to meet, but if getting there were so easy, it'd be done. It was growing on him. So now I think it's fair to say that he has been influenced. He did change some stuff, and we actually don't know. Yes. It's all muddied now. You can't separate it actually.
So yeah, I'm with you. So the June 1st was his update where he said, "Hey, I finished the Clutch of Cersei chapters. Like that wasn't long ago. Now I'm wrestling with Jaime and Brienne. Not as fast. I'm still working on it. Not as fast as many of you would like." Now here he said, 23 days later or whatever that was it June 1st or June 6th. June 1st. So, 22 days later, and he's saying he's working on Tyrion. So does that mean he finished Jaime and Brienne chapters? Like
he very well might have. I mean, that's the thing is, again, once you get through some of what you saw as a problem, he's got notes, he's got stuff sort of outlined. It's the first drafts, right? I mean, his first draft of it might be done, right? It's whatever. And then you and I have even tried to break it down, like not even keeping the show out of our minds. Like there's a lot of problems where you have a lot of knots in this story. You do. You really do.
Like everyone talks about the Marine knot, like we got to get past that. But like there's a lot, like right now it's like, what do you do with Sansa? She's just sort of hanging out. Like you're gonna have to do something with her. You're gonna have to do something with all these characters, because it's like you just have to. You're at a decision point for a lot of these characters. Like Ramsay or Stannis has to go. One of them is not making it out of this battle.
Yeah.
And it's just which decision do you go with? And it sounds like he's figuring out a lot of that Cersei, which has King's Landing story, which also would involve young Griff, which will involve the Faith, which will involve the Tyrells. Right. So it's like once you get past that, okay, now he's on to Jaime and Brienne. Sounds like he might be done with them for a little bit. And now he's over on Tyrion, which is on the other side of the map. So is he done with Westeros? Is he now working on Essos? Because to me, if the next thing he says is I'm writing Daenerys, then I think he's almost done.
For sure. Absolutely. And I think going to Tyrion is sort of the way to almost, if you follow it, it does. And again, we have no idea, but it's like, if we try to piece it together, it does seem like, he's wrapping these things up through points of views. I know you can sometimes work on, I'm going to do this clutch of Cersei chapters, and I might have 1 or 2 Cersei chapters left to finish, maybe. But still, to get a batch of them done and then just to kind of figure out which one do you want to end in that story, because they all have stories that can, again, be pushed into the next thing. So where do you want to draw the line and leave us with some good cutoffs or whatever? So I think that's going to be interesting and fascinating. You know, I'm just pumped to see what we have going on.
I do too.
Westeros.
It's sick. I'm so ecstatic that we got this update.
Right.
One, because when I announced it, people said, "You guys, it's never gonna happen. This thing is not in development.
Right.
It's a total farce." Well, it's not. Right.
I know. But we actually were on Fantasy Network and we were talking about it, and so it was sort of people were throwing some shade at the idea that this is not going to happen. It's fanfic. It's
Right.
not whatever. There's no source material for it, etc.
Right.
And there is. There really is. And so I think this is exciting to have this confirmation. For anybody who believed in the show and was like pumped about it, I feel like it's cool, because to me the most exciting thing in Star Wars would be to see a sequel, to move forward. And because you can go forward in the timeline there. Right. It brings people back to the table or whatever. So this would be the most exciting thing, is to like, okay, what's the rest of where you have those characters who we love and fell in love with. We want to know what happens. What's it like to be the Queen of the North or King Beyond the Wall and all that stuff? And how does his brother, how's Bran doing down in King's Landing? I mean, this is one of the most successful shows ever. So
Game of Thrones is the most successful.
Yeah. So it's like,
at least in terms of awards.
That? It's like, yeah. Why would you not want to see, I guess, it continue? I don't know because again, if you could argue that, well, let's say for argument's sake, one more point here. Let's say that you said, all right, guys, well, we already saw the end. That's what they showed us in season 8 is also the end of the book series. We got it. All of this will be beyond anything George is writing. So what? So what? Then that's great. I mean, that means the story does end in some way, and he's shown Jon Snow lives through the next 2 books, and he will end up at the end being alive and going beyond the wall or whatever. Then George said, like, that's where I was going to end the Song of Ice and Fire arc. You can now.
That doesn't mean you can now go forward. Yeah, I mean, like you can end like Lord of the Rings, right? Yeah. What I mean, what's the next chapter? What's the next chapter, Ez?
Technically, you could in that. I mean, it just goes. I mean, again, Aragorn rules for a long time. Arwen is there, right? I mean, Frodo actually if you wanted to. Frodo stays in the Shire for a long time. You know what I mean? Like it's like then he goes to the Grey Havens or whatever, and then Sam stays there. Merry and Pippin become sheriffs in the Shire.
Right.
Like, you know what I mean? Like they have like not
unless it ends with like everyone dying, then there's room to continue.
Goes on. Yeah. It's
bonkers. Or you do something else where it's like what happens in 100 years and it's like the children of the Starks.
Yeah,
it just goes on.
Somebody brought up a good point about like, hey, they could flash forward like, 20 years and say, hey, what happened? Is Bran turned evil? Did we really get there? All of a sudden we step in here and things are bad south of the wall.
How much of the other Starks will we see? I don't think that, honest to God, I don't think if you're going to do this thing, if you're really going to do a Snow season 1, the only other characters that we know that I would show, in all honesty, would be Tormund and Ghost.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then I would make it like, oh, it's all about above the wall and there's some new threat, or like we go to the heart of winter, or I don't know. Then, doesn't it end with like, isn't there like grass growing north of the wall?
It's more green. It's more green than it was like the winter.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's like, isn't it sort of like melting up there too?
Right.
I need to pull it up. I haven't watched it in obvious sense.
There's a kingdom beyond the wall now, and one of the things that's interesting about the history of it is that there are the Fists of the First Men. It is a fortress of some kind. There is something going on there, and so there is more that he's going to explore and figure out, and that'll tie into some of the lore or whatever, which is great. The only thing he has to do in this, if it's a season 1 where there's like 6 episodes or 8. Somewhere, if you confirm, if you're feeling good about a season 2 and you want Sansa back in it, all you need is a letter from the Queen in the North. Somewhere in there, he's got a letter. Who's it from? It's from Sansa, right? And then you set us up for a season 2, then where you weave in more Starks, or Arya shows up at the end, some cliffhanger. We need you south of the wall. You know what I mean? Like whatever you want to do, she's back and trying to bring people in. They're going to write something fascinating, and I just feel like. Yeah, but at the end, I left. I don't remember exactly. Are you looking at it now? Kind of.
I'm watching right now. It's just that it's just them
There's a
watching, but
bit of grass.
there's like a
Yeah.
piece of grass that
Yeah.
they show. So what's to say it hasn't sort of melted up there a little bit? Because like
Right.
now the Night King and maybe the others are gone, and who knows what's up there.
Right. What are they going to find? Some more that mystical element or the high fantasy stuff or whatever could start to emerge, and we learn
Could the Children of Forest come back? Yes, they could.
Yeah, could they? Yeah, exactly. Maybe that again, that's something where they want to sort of reclaim some of their territory and stuff, or just sort of interact with Jon and his people. Maybe they wanted to claim everything beyond the wall, and they wanted Mance Rayder and his people out of there. Who knows, right? So,
Interesting. It's all interesting. And Ez and I will be back, and we will be diving much more into all of it, because to me, of all of the things that have been announced outside of, House of the Dragon, this one is the one that you need to push.
Oh, well, this is the one you and I will probably be theorizing the most about now. I mean, honestly, it's just like because we can. I don't care what anybody said. Well, it's a source material. What's your whatever? Like, no, now you can honestly
George is the one there, and he's said, I'm working on it,
and he's keeping the canon. He's keeping everything going or whatever. So it's so fun to kind of theorize now, because you could just, if somebody threw out a crazy idea of like 40, 50 years in the future, you can throw those ideas out now, because we are beyond
will we
the
see
Song of Ice and
Grumpkins
Fire
and
arc.
Snarks? Maybe, but you know what?
Maybe
The best part about this is now we get to explore it.
Yeah,
we might just see Grumpkins and Snarks.
It would be awesome. That'd be awesome. So
awesome. All right, guys. Well, hey, thank you guys for joining us. We had a lot of people in here, and we weren't planning on doing this. It just sort of happened. It was I said, I messaged Ez, and I was like, Ez, I don't know what your Thursday night plans were, buddy, but we have breaking news, and we gotta get online now. So
yeah.
So here we go. So anyway, so thank you guys as always for watching. Thank you guys as always for listening. We'll be back next week. Actually, next week, Ez will be in house.
Oh, that's right.
In my house.
That's right. Let's go. I'm excited. Yeah, I'm gonna be out there in Portland. We'll have to do a little special. We haven't recorded together since what? Prior to the like in house since before the pandemic or something.
No, it was summer of 2020.
Oh, that's right. Because you did. That's right.
Because I came back last year, but then like you were leaving. You were like going to Germany. It was like
that's right.
We missed,
Germany,
we just sort of missed each other. Yeah. So.
Right. That'd be fun.
Yeah, so we'll be doing something. Nonetheless, anyway, and as always, thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for listening. Stay tuned. We'll break this down to a handful of shorter videos as well, and who knows, just popping some stuff off next week as we get more details and everything else coming out. And then also, the House of the Dragon Twitter has been going nuts, and I would not be shocked if we don't get a teaser sometime soon.
Sometime very soon. Yeah. So look forward to that. Yeah.
Stay tuned for that. So awesome, guys. Well, as always, thank you guys as always. And remember that winter is coming.